that is my that is my kryptonite. So hello everybody. I'm just gonna say good morning and get us going and introduce our panel as people are filing into the room. Gosh, this is our last webinar of 2020. Heather, when did we start this? March, right?
March.
I can't believe that it's that many months ago, and 2020 is the end of it is in the distance, not too far distance. So I'm just going to plug right into our amazing panel who's taking time with us today. The first person is Alison Deutsch. Am I saying that correctly?
It's
No.
Deutch.
Deutch. Of course I didn't do it right. Right off the bat. She doesn't disappoint, folks. Alison Deutsch. She's an art producer at Wild Type Health. Honestly, this is not the right sheet. Oh, I can't even believe that. So Allison gave me a whole lot of information on her, and I will pull that up in a brief amount of time. But Allison, you've spent most of your career at Wild Type. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. This is my first true job out of school.
And you have done a myriad of different things there, as I remember, because I did literally read this morning. And that one personal thing about you that you were going to share with us.
My tidbit is I started my advertising career at 5 years old because I was on a billboard for the Children's Home Society in Miami.
That was exactly. I remember reading this morning, and I apologize for kind of mucking up your your introduction here. Next, I wanted to go to Khayyat Dalager, Director of Operations at Carmichael Lynch. She has been the Director of Creative Integrated Production at Best Buy, Director of Operations at Hogarth, Minneapolis. She loves working at a company with great people, high integrity, and amazing creative work. She's a geek and loves all things technology, science, and science fiction. She's been married for 35 years to the same man and have 2 adult daughters, a dog, a cat, and a cockatiel,
which you will hear in the background.
The next person up is Milan. Milan Martin. He's the founder and CEO of the Free Spirits Company. He was previously the president at Gray Advertising, CMO Concourse Technology, senior partner at Ogilvy Mather. The favorite part of his job is that he loves that after all these years in the ad business, he gets to have a company that allows him the creative freedom to bring his ideas to life without the process or politics of corporate America. If he has an idea of something to do something fun, creative, or new to grow the business, he gets to do it. It may work, it may not, but he is able to try things that try new things, which is a ton of fun. He's played guitar his whole life, poorly. So in his 40s, he switched to the drums, and he plays in a Martin County-based band called the Sofa Kings. I love that name. That's awesome. Next up is Steve Ross. He's the head of production at Allstate. Prior to that, he was head of production at McGarry Bowen in Chicago. He was a freelance senior executive producer and worked at FCB Health, Ogilvy, Hoffman York, and McGarry Bowen, producer and head of production in the Chicago Creative Partnership. His favorite part of production is always traveling to places he would never have chosen to visit and getting access to things that were previously inaccessible. He's a huge music fan, and he still has his collection of CDs and albums that totals over 6,000. He's seen countless concerts, including Bruce Springsteen over 100 times. That is impressive.
Or sick. It depends on your perspective, but yeah.
Well, I mean, does that mean you've gone to the to his Broadway show as well?
I did go to the Broadway show, yeah.
That's pretty awesome. Okay, so next up is Rémi, and this I'm gonna wreck, but Khayyat, is that it?
Khayyat.
Did I do it? Khayyat.
Yeah.
She is a senior art director. She's currently at Pacific Communications, AbbVie, and Colors International, has been at Colors International and New York Jet Club. I think I just wrecked that. So pretty miserably, so I apologize. Her favorite part of her job is the strategic part. She's also a refugee, and she's only been in the United States for 5 years. She just got her case approved a couple of months ago.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's exciting. She loves working with artists that make beautiful images. Oh no, I wrote that was
That's
the wrong.
not me.
That's not you. She's also a baker. And thanks to COVID, she's increased her baking skills, which is awesome.
Yeah,
So
pretty much. Yep.
you're the one making all the sourdough, is that right?
Actually, we haven't bought bread since probably April.
So next up is Sara Levy. She's a senior art buyer at the Martin Agency. After her first job, she was a freelance producer for some time, and then she joined JWT in New York, where she was there for 7 years. She's been at the Martin Agency since 2016. She still loves production after all these years, and this is where I jumped the gun. She loves working with the artists that make beautiful images. A few things about her: she is Italian and she can't speak slowly. Neither can I, so I feel you on this.
Slow it down.
Yeah, she cannot begin her day without cleaning her desk. Her favorite fictional character, Mark Waltney from the Martian novel, and her dream job is to be an explorer. Last but not least is Heather Elder. She's been an agent for over 20 years. She hosts the Dear Art Producer podcast, writes a blog about the industry, and hosts a site for freelance art producers. Mostly, though, she's always thinking ahead, and what better time to do that than now. And then there's me. I'm Heidi. I'm with Workbook, and I've been there for 7 years, and I get to support artists all the time. And this is just another avenue of how we do that. So off to the races, I believe. I think that, as we're nearing the end of 2020, it's kind of a good way to, good moment to sort of look back. So by now, whether most people have done a level of production, whether it be remote or in person, most have created some sort of content during COVID restrictions. And I was wondering, who could sort of tell us about what you learned? I'd love to start with Milan, if you are smiling at me. No, Milan's smiling, never mind. Anyways, Milan.
Yeah, I know, it's true. I mean, we've done a couple of shoots, photography shoots, a couple of spots have been produced. And I mean, I think the only way I can kind of characterize it is, I think prior to COVID, we took for granted, how swiftly we could move throughout the world and get things done. I kind of liken it to, walking around with a broken foot. Like, you can kind of get there, but you're moving much more intentionally and you're moving much more slowly. So, we were able to produce some really wonderful stuff and have been over the past, whatever, it's been eight months. But again, it's all about doing it in a responsible way. And I think production people, I've always been in awe of their ability to get things done beautifully and inventively and responsibly. And I think that in this COVID world, there's a sense of responsibility has really shined through in making sure people are taken care of and people are safe, and you're still getting to a great creative product.
I'd love to go to you, Sara, and ask you sort of to expand on that. What do you think has changed for the good and will become a new way of working regardless of COVID in this sort of realm?
Well, I think the unanimous agreement amongst producers here at Martin, we've talked a little bit about some of the questions you sent because I wanted to have sort of a bigger perspective than just my own, is that we have proven that we can do good work and have reliable quality productions remotely. And, again, the remote approach can save a lot of money. It is a new way of working that I don't think is going to go truly back to where it was before. And I really believe that finally, not only from a production standpoint, but even from a personal, work-life balance standpoint, companies and brands are going to be very open to working differently now.
I think that's really true. We're certainly all experiencing it. So I wanted to go to Rémi. What do you value most in the photographer, director, illustrator relationship? And what is And was that different before COVID?
So I'm gonna start with saying it was not different. It's actually the same. And I think number one is for me the communication between us, because we could be on like different wavelengths sometimes, and communication solves the problem. And the ones who made it, made an effort to actually over communicate during COVID when we're remote, and actually, trying to make sure we're confirming the information, saved us tons of time on the back and forth, the wasted time that happens while you're working remote, because typing, it's always misread. It could be misinterpreted in a really, really wrong way. And if you don't over communicate, most things get lost in translation. So I think that's very important.
Heidi, I'd like to just kind of point something out here, which I think is really interesting. When we first started these webinars back in March, and we were doing them weekly for quite a long time through July. And during the early parts, we were trying to predict what would rise to the top, during COVID, and also when we got back to production. And Rémi, it's so great to hear that you are saying that about communication, because that was the one thing that always rose to the top for us early on, about how important communication was going to be, whether you were on set or not, keeping in touch with the clients. And then also, obviously, when you're shooting and producing, being able to communicate so clearly while you're on set with these different tools. So it's great to hear you say that, kind of valuing it so much, because
it's what makes everything work out or doesn't, even if you're working with the most genius people on earth. If there's no communication, nothing works.
But you had to figure out new ways to communicate with people
Absolutely.
on set like that. And I think each person, it's hard on set to be shooting and communicating and getting feedback and trying to stay in your creative space.
So for me, actually, being on set was the most smooth part, because we had so heavily communicated, as you were saying previously, more than ever before, right? We had to triple, quadruple check every single moment, every single aspect of the production. Our pre-roll books became essentially way more detailed than ever before, so that we can all make sure we were on the same page, so that production would go well. So most of the communication for me ended up being, and most of the challenge of keeping up with it is now really upfront, because when we're there on set together, we tend to sort of fluidly do these things, but having us all in different rooms in different places in the world.
So when you're saying
we got there, it was good.
And when you're saying on set, you're talking about the remote system now.
The remote system, that it has worked incredibly well for us on most occasions.
So my next question is, did you talk to the artist earlier in the process to determine the feasibility and so on? I'd love to go to Kat on that. No, she's muted.
Sorry, I'm unmuted. I'd say that it seems like there's kind of an exchange of things, right? So just backtracking a little bit, it seems like the timelines have gotten longer because there's more complication as you go into the process. And so, for example, that over communication piece, that takes more time. You need to be very explicit before you're going into your production, because there is no room. It's not like you can suddenly fix it there. And you're still having a cast of thousands, maybe not 10,000, but it's still a lot of different people. And so you're replacing some things. So, and again, I'm basing this on what my production team has been telling me, the producers that work there, is that a lot of that is, so now you need to make sure you have that contact person for the agency, as well as somebody who is communicating to those on set. So you've added some roles, you've added things like the COVID compliance officer, right? So it's opened up some different opportunities there. But again, to Rémi's point, it doesn't replace communication. That's still the key to everything.
So is there a traffic cop kind of an officer, is what you're sort of saying, that monitors communication?
In some cases, yes. So you have to, because you're going to be virtual, and yet, so you need someone paying attention to what's happening virtually, as well as someone who's dealing with things that are happening on set. And so that if you don't have that person ready to communicate with you from the agency side, then it makes it harder for that communication then to be translated. And Sara, I don't know if you've had that situation. I've heard where it's like, hello, we have something to say, hello. And they're off on set talking to someone else and, you know, trying to get attention. So then you're texting and doing
Yeah, I
other
think
things to get their attention.
we had multiple platforms that you were saying. So I would text directly with the producer, and then we had two remote setups, one for the client and the account management to be on, and one for the photographer and the art directors to be on. And secretly we were slacking in the background between me and the account management so that we could relate to each other without having the client fully on always into our personal background conversations, which are sometimes irrelevant to them and sometimes you just don't think is appropriate for them to hear certain parts. So, but it really moved really well together, and we did some tests ahead of time to do so.
And when I was at Best Buy, we did something similar pre-COVID, where we were using iPads to communicate rather than just then it's a little bit of a different type of loop than someone's cell phone. It was a little faster to do that, but it's still, because there are always still those communications that you don't want the client to be listening in on or hearing. And it's, you know, if you're in the same room, a phone call, of course, they can hear everything. Yeah. So we
had a lot of also interventions on making comments on talent as talent was there, because people might sometimes not realize that whatever they're saying are, you know, it needs to be checked. We need to be aware that everyone can hear.
In this world 10 years ago, it would have been much more difficult to accomplish.
Oh right? Yeah, it would have been, yeah, I would say almost near impossible.
Yeah. And I'm seeing Steve like nodding along here, and I want to go to you, Steve. You know, how have expectations changed about what can and cannot be done on set? It's sort of elaborating on what Kat and Sara were saying.
I guess to a degree, not too much. We've done quite a bit of big production still during this time. In fact, I'm literally monitoring a shoot right now on another screen right here. So just to show how capable we are of doing it, to what people have said previously, what we're able to do with this technology is pretty remarkable. Touching on a few of the things that were mentioned, of course, what we're able to do is incredible. And how production has been able to adapt. I mean, that's basically what producers do. We adapt, and production, more than any industry, I think, has shown the ability to adapt to what's been thrown at us and figure out a way to keep moving and do it safely. And so the community deserves a pat on the back for that. However, it does not replace being there. And to your question about will it ever go back, I don't think it'll ever go back to normal or the way it was. Because there are efficiencies and savings and people realizing that not everybody has to get on a plane and fly to LA for every shoot or to be there as long as they used to be. So a lot of those things will change, but the dynamic of being on set, the 1 + 1 = 3 is lost when we're at home. So much is all prep. Prep now is critical, as everyone has said, but what you don't even get with prep is the sitting in a passenger van going on a tech scout with the director for 6 hours and developing a bond, developing a trust, having the director realize that you and your team have actually some decent thoughts and suggestions, and starting to develop that kind of camaraderie that will enable sparks to fly on set and for suggestions to come spontaneously. And I feel that that's something that's really been missing and will only kind of come back when we can get in the same room together, have a drink at the crappy hotel bar at the end of a long day, and talk about what went well and what we think we might want to achieve in the first thing in the next day. That kind of stuff is so critical, but is something that we're missing a little bit during this time.
I'm seeing Kat raise her hand.
Yeah, and I'm from what I'm understanding too, and maybe the others can corroborate this, that you might be saving in travel, but the cost of being COVID compliant and safe basically offsets a lot of that travel because it's expensive to do that.
Yes, the compliance costs are expensive and only getting more and more expensive. As I don't know if you all heard like the latest guidelines and the testing, and it's just, and it's all totally valid and should be there, but it comes at a cost. And so there is a trade-off there. I think people's time, you're not going to be able to put a price on somebody's time if they feel they're better served in the office dealing with 10 other things versus getting on a plane and being on location, that makes total sense. And those people probably shouldn't attend, but I think we'll find a smaller core group of people going to shoots, maybe for a more compacted amount of time, a shorter amount of time than we used to. But hopefully that day will come when we can all revisit and get back on a plane again.
Sarah?
I have a question. I noticed that, especially with lifestyle shoots that we've had, not so much product shoots, of course, where I think nobody needs to ever probably fly again for. But it almost felt nice at times that my art directors had to sort of move with the flow and keep on moving and not get stuck on certain things and overthink it too much. You know, sometimes classically in advertising, you have so many cooks in the kitchen, and it feels like we're at one point beating the dead creative horse, and we should just trust our artists, right? This is why the directors are there, the photographers are there. Their work is why we hire them to begin with, and I find that we tend to over control it many times. And in this instance, I actually had the opposite surprise at times, where the art directors just were able to move on more easily and be less, I don't want to say fussy because that's not true, it's their baby, I know that, right? It's fair. But just sort of release a little bit of that creative restraints that they usually have.
Oh, that's really interesting. I want to go to Allison and ask, you know, what factors maybe rose to the top when you're awarding projects this year to the artists? You know, Sara just really emphasized, you know, the leaning into the talent, which everyone listening, I'm sure, is thrilled to hear. But I wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
I think one of the biggest parts is kind of what we talked about earlier with communication with the photographer and just making sure you and your team are really comfortable, because a lot of it is giving up some control, especially if you're not there. You have to trust that they're going to be like acting on your behalf and accomplishing great work. And for actually my first shoot we did during COVID, we had such a long pre-production phase because it was supposed to happen, I think, in April, obviously not. So we started planning in February and didn't actually shoot till July. So by the time that shoot date came, it was so easy because I had been checking in with the photographer and his producer almost weekly, if not more, for 4 months. So by the time that came, that's something that doesn't happen often and shouldn't happen often. 4 months planning is a lot. But it's something I wouldn't take away. It was great.
So my next question is to Kat. What impact has diversity, equity, and inclusion has on the review and selection process?
It has made a lot of difference. And I think, especially after the murder of George Floyd, and coming from Minneapolis right here, it was very, very immediately felt. And so thankfully, I work at an agency that is really, really progressive in making sure that DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, is an important part of our fabric. We've definitely enhanced the DEI efforts that we've had here, including to the point of making sure we're using diverse talent, that we are making culturally relevant work. And then also whether in that talent could be whether they're in front of the camera or behind the camera, and then providing those opportunities. So as well as making sure that our staff is more diverse as well, because as you know, once you have a very diverse work environment, then people can kind of almost self-regulate what the messages might be, et cetera. So we're really striving toward that. It's interesting because you have within an organization like we're 300 some strong, and we're part of a holding company, which is IPG. You have the resources at that level, and then you have your local resources. And what photographers may find is that there are times in which part of our ask of you is going to be, why aren't you representing diverse talent in your work, for example, because that's going to be representative, whether it's original photography or whether it's stock. We're going to be seeking out diverse talent behind the camera as well. And then again, making sure that we're including diverse talent, whether it is models or voiceovers or whatever. So it really has made an impact on how we operate.
I'm gonna go to Rémi. She was raising her hand for me.
Yes,
And-
because like this has been, I mean, I'm new to the US. I come from the Middle East. I worked in Dubai where there were like more than 100 nationalities there. And then I come here and it's like, you know, we're in a first world country, California, specifically LA, where you would think there would be way more diversity in the clients and the models you see and the talent. But actually, I thought that was missing. And I was just hearing the conversation that has been happening for over maybe the last year, when the pressure is happening more on corporates to be more diverse, more inclusive, whether it's race, whether it's orientation sexually, whatever it is. It really is very important, because you cannot understand other cultures or other ethnicities or other anything unless you are interacting with them. And no matter how much you are sympathizing, it's very different when you're speaking to them, actually. And I'm happy to start seeing it happening in corporates, because it really changes the conversation. It is so, so important. And it's a very, very valid point to speak about.
And so it sort of dovetails into the next question, which is, how are agencies and brands handling DEI within their companies? I sort of would love to ask Ross or Milan if either one of you would like to weigh in on that part.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, my journey's come through 20 years in the advertising business. And I think, you know, the advertising business, if I'm completely candid, has always approached DEI in a way that has acknowledged its importance, but I would almost characterize it as obligatory. But I think over the past, you know, call it year with, you know, with what George Floyd's passing and Breonna Taylor and all of these other really, really horrific experiences have kind of elevated themselves into our world, where it's gone from obligatory into being one of celebration, and actually, you know, seeing the value of diversity in, you know, again, just like Kat said, in front of the camera and behind the camera and all around the camera, and getting it all done in a way that you kind of realize, oh gosh, this brings a really wonderful richness to the creative product, versus I think what the industry did for many, many years, which was checking boxes.
And I have to apologize to Steve. I don't know why I called you Ross. I just that was a
I know,
big.
I thought you were going for like my high school coach thing.
I know, what is it? Hey,
Ross,
Ross,
get in there.
Get in
Yeah.
there. I don't know why I did it. The minute I came out of my mouth, I went, what did I just do? So just big apologies. I know your name is Steve and you're not on Friends.
What you
So
get for having two first names?
I apologize. So I didn't know if you wanted to add anything now that I'm properly addressing your name.
I echo everything that's been said. I think, you know, I'm pretty new at Allstate. I started in March, and I had come also from agency world my whole career. And I will say, being on the client side at Allstate, at least, they're pretty serious about all of the issues, and they're very looking for ways to try to help move the needle. We just I just spoke to Allie Brown. I don't know if you've heard of the Double the Line initiative that the AICP has endorsed and introduced. Allie is president of Pretty Bird Productions, and it's a new initiative where they're going to try to get production companies and agencies and clients to pay to double the line, meaning to give an opportunity to any line on the bid form. So it could be an AD, for example, or it could be the location scout or stylist, and you pay for another person, a BIPOC person of color who wouldn't have the opportunity because they don't have the reel or the experience yet to be hired. Typically, they're looking for candidates who come from music video world or from other worlds. The commercial industry is unfortunately really one of the worst in terms of diversity. And so it's sometimes there are folks who are working in other industries who are fully capable but haven't gotten the opportunity in the insular world of the commercial production. And so this is a chance to have double the line, basically add another person on the crew for the price their regular, however many days they'd be on, and give them an opportunity to be another set of hands and be exposed, make the connections, and have that experience now on their reel and resumes to be able to be hired for the next time. So it's initiatives like that that we are certainly keeping our eyes and ears open for. And anytime I've brought them forward at Allstate, people have been excited to act on them. So it's important, and everyone is starting to. It's way too late, but people, like you said, this year has been a tipping point, and I think everyone is really looking for opportunities to make a difference.
Absolutely. The cat. Oh,
I think Sarah was before me.
That's
Sorry.
great. Okay. We got
I
time.
was going to mention that a lot of organizations are also forming their own committees. I'm a member of ASMP, and I'm on the DEI Council. And I know that a lot of local chapters are trying to start that conversation in different phases. So I think as photographers, again, the things that you can do is ask your membership, ask your people to learn more about it and become more aware of it. And that will help you stay current with things that will also help you in your careers.
Sarah, did you have a question?
Well, I was just going to talk about a little bit what Martin has been doing. I've been so grateful working here. A whole new world has opened up, especially now. But we've always tried to be very purposeful about who we select to help us create the work we do. We signed to Free the Bid and we support Free the Work. Then we realized, it doesn't work if we get to production, and that's when we try and be inclusive. So Martin came up with, the visibility brief, which is essentially an attempt to make representation, belonging, and equity central to the briefing process and carrying it all the way through strategy, ideation, creative development, and then you get to the production section. So that from the inception in the work, there is a requirement essentially now for us. So if you're a writer or a creative, you have to have these parameters on as you create the idea. And so there is representation not only in the topic of the work, but not only in the talent that makes it. It just expands throughout. And I think it's helpful because it makes you do it, because that's what we need to do, right? Is stop saying we're going to do it and actually make rules for ourselves to change it, forcefully.
Or provide environments for it, which to happen. And
it's accountability. And we have a process literally where we vet the work before it goes to the client, and making sure that, again, it's culturally sensitive and that it's inclusive, it represents a variety of different groups, and it's, again, just puts a different little lens on things. And so that's before it goes out to the client, before it goes out the door even.
I'm sitting here listening to all of these, kind of recap of production in 2020 and obviously what's happening with DEI. And I'm getting kind of excited for 2021, thinking about what, all the things that we've learned and how we're going to move that forward into 2021, and the amazing work that can come out of all of the work that we've put into, everybody, our community, our industry has put into becoming better at, execution, inclusion, all of those things. And it makes me wonder what you all think will kind of be valued most in production in 2021. Milan, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah.
What do you think is going to rise to the top, given everything?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, because I think that there's two key topics or trends that I've experienced and have been mentioned a lot on this panel, and those are efficiency, and of course the efficiency that comes with remote working and the speed of some processes in COVID, and then this notion of collaboration. But I think what I've experienced, and I've been really fortunate, with our company and with a couple of key partners we have, is we've actually achieved efficiency through collaboration. And, in my kind of big corporate advertising days, if I'm completely honest, the photographer was way downstream. It was a thought that was after, months and months of strategy and months of creative and so on and so on and so forth. Been fortunate to find, you know, a partner in a photographer who is capable of talking way upstream and helping us build this brand from the get-go. And so, you know, we're excited to kind of get moving in that way moving forward.
And it's great to hear you say that, because the conversations that are happening on our side of the table are the same. How do we make our artists, or how do we encourage our artists to talk about themselves in a way that speaks that language that you're saying in terms of collaboration and being invited to the table a lot sooner. And it means that, you know, your images or the work you create can't speak for itself anymore. Like, you will hire someone because, oh, that's a, you know, it used to be because that's, oh, that's a really cool shot, I want that, something similar, you know, for my current campaign. But now I think there's so much more that goes into choosing a photographer or an illustrator or an artist for whatever it is that you're creating, because you do want them at the table next to you a lot sooner.
Yep.
How about you, Allison? Have you experienced that similar process in your last productions?
It's sort of like more type. So our issue when it, I don't want to say the word issue, when it comes to more like diversity and collaboration on set is, so we're HCP Pharma. When it comes to casting, we have a type we need to follow. It's really the patient types of whatever indication we're marketing at the moment. So unfortunately, it seems like we're kind of not stuck, but we're already determined how we have to move forward. And so we try and make up for that in other ways. But when it comes to casting, we're, yeah, not really have much to say there.
Rémi, how about you on set? Are you, or not on set, I'm sorry, in terms of the conversations you're going to be having moving forward into 2021 when choosing artists, what do you think is going to rise to the top?
So what you mentioned is actually a very important point about how we are having to be more selective, you know, taking more time in actually checking who we're gonna hire to bring them faster on board and make sure from the get-go that they're the right candidate. To be honest, this should have been happening even pre-COVID, because the amount of times you find yourself ending up with an artist that after, oh yeah, sure, we're talking, we're clicking, chemistry is good, they check all the boxes, but then you bring them on board and then you find out they can't do the day-to-day, they're not fast enough, they're not understanding the brief. There are so many things that we used to take for granted, like, oh yeah, that's fine now, I don't need to worry about it. Then you end up wasting months and money and process and time, which now we're more careful about because everyone's budget is you know, shrinking. They're more cautious, more conscious about how they spend the money. And I think this should have been happening every time since before COVID. And it should be the way to go, even after, hopefully, life goes back to normal.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I see it on the same, the conversations that I'm having with agencies and brands when they're considering our talent is very different than what we have. It was much more complex, and there's a lot more time spent getting to know them and understanding their capabilities. And so I would say to the people that are listening today, you know, it's so important to be able to communicate your capabilities to the people that you're trying to get business from, and to be able to, you know, show what sort of value you're going to bring to them beyond just the work that you will create.
Yeah, like if I can say something on this, I do remember, because I work in pharma as well, but I wasn't in pharma when I came. So one of the things that I was asking the people in pharma, for example, like, what is something that's making you different for pharma to hire you other than having good portfolio, having a good character, working good under pressure? And the details that you forget of mentioning, the logistics. The logistics are actually very important, saying, I know how to deal with the legalities of pharma. Even though it's not designed, but the fact that you have this on your resume bumps your value really high, because it is as important as, because you could be a good designer but not able to, you know, hand things on deadline or missing legal things, and it will ruin the whole project. So yeah, you're right. It's very, very important to point out and to come through it, to saying everything you're capable of.
What about creativity? You know, where is that coming into the process when you're talking to an artist? Is that the creative call? And then once you award the job, you're getting kind of mired down into the details. I mean, Steve, why don't you kind of chime in on, and maybe you can offer some insight, having been on the agency side and now you're on the brand side. You know, where are those creative conversations happening and when?
Are you asking me, or who are you asking?
Oh, Steve, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Call me Steve. You might know me as Ross. Either way.
I was going to say, you know, Ross.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Creative is still king, right? I mean, yes, you want to work with people who you can trust are going to be able to navigate the challenging times and the challenging budgets and the tighter timelines and all those things. That's more important than ever, which is why you may tend to go to proven entities instead of trying new people, which is a double-edged sword. You know, you go to those proven entities because you know what you're going to get and you don't want to risk anything, but then you're also cutting yourself off from discovering wonderful new talent. So I think we all have to be careful about that end of it. As far as where does creativity come in, I mean, it still leads the day. It's going to be you're only going to go to a production company or a photographer or who you believe is going to be buttoned up and deliver, you know, what you need from the production end, from the nuts and bolts and the legality and being all buttoned up. That's cost of entry, I think. But creative is still going to be the lead decision once you vet it out and put aside everybody that you don't have faith in or you don't want to take a risk on. You're still then you have to, it boils down to who's got the best creative vision and is going to deliver creatively for your vision. So I think creative is still leading the charge.
So we're hearing that artists are being valued more as creative partners and so on. So, but even when we have a vaccine and we're back to work fully, how do you think that the experiences that we've all started to share up to date is going to affect the future of the industry? I want to go to Sara very badly on this one.
Yeah, it's hard to make predictions because so much in this past year has taught me do not make predictions. You don't know what's going to happen next. I would say that going back to some of the points we already have touched is probably there will be more remote everything. I think remote is going to be a new part of production that's staying for certain projects. I think that this conscious seem to have grown in the past few years, which is not just COVID obviously related or only George Floyd related. I think we are finally getting to a place as a nation and as at least this nation, where we really are trying to change. We're really trying to grow up. And I'm hoping that we will continue this path, that it will define more of the work in the next year and the years to come. And I think that's really where my thoughts go right now.
I want Milan to just expand on this area too. Where are we going in that, in your opinion, and what trends are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I do really believe that, the production world, the artist world has an opportunity to move upstream in the conversation in the context of marketing. I've seen it happen in a handful of ways during this whole experience, and it's been really wonderful. And so I think that that is something that requires some work on the part of the industry to kind of say, coming from, again, the agency world where you're so focused on craft and clients are so focused on results. I think that the artists who can talk in both colors and both languages around why the craft is important for the sake of better results, I think are going to be those who find themselves at the bigger tables.
Interesting. So now I want to sort of shift gears a little bit and talking about how artists, photographers, and market to you guys, directly to you, to get into these positions and so on. So, you know, what marketing resonates with you this year or moving forward for 2021? I'd love to hear that. And I'm gonna go to Ross. No, I'm going to Steve. Steve, could you maybe talk to that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, it's harder and harder, I'm sure, for reps to reach out. And, you know, we used to have screenings weekly at my old agency. Every Wednesday we had screenings, and production companies come in and get to meet people face to face and show the work. And so obviously that's not happening now. However, there are virtual screenings being set up more and more. People are trying to figure out a way to make that happen. We found it hard to get people to actually make the time to do it. Working from home somehow has made people even harder sometimes to get. So I still respond to, you know, direct emails. Obviously, reps who I have relationships with are more important than ever, and I, you know, always make the time to have a virtual cup of coffee, in which I'm addicted to coffee, so I'm always happy to jump on the phone with somebody and have a Zoom coffee. I did this morning with somebody, and do it's a little more one-on-one. It's a little less of a group. Get everybody together to look at a portfolio or to look at reels. I've found has been a little harder to orchestrate. Not saying it's impossible, and other folks may have had more success with it than I have so far, but we've just been a little too busy to do it. But I think a lot of the traditional ways with just the current tweaks are still applicable, and, you know, leaning on the relationships that you already have and know. And as far as, you know, if you were someone who took a meeting with someone before, a cold call, and were willing to meet with someone, you're probably prone to doing it virtually as well, which is what my producers and I continue to try to do.
Allison, can you add anything to that about how people get to you effectively right now?
I would say, as the other way around, the biggest way I go out is kind of what Steve was saying. It's I rely on the reps I know a lot. Like for the shoot I just did, I actually called Heather up to sort of just go through all this. And it's like, what is even realistic in a COVID environment? And so she sort of helped me through that. So that was great. And then obviously help look at some photographers. I really also like the idea, Steve, of what you were saying of the sort of coffee portfolio reviews or mini reviews. We tried to do a portfolio review once during COVID, and it just didn't end up working. We always had a hard time really getting people to go in person, and a lot of the times they just went for the food. So when you take that away, it's even harder. I'd be really interested if anyone has successful ways of, without sending everyone some sandwiches,
You know,
of having that sort of incentive to share with creatives. But when it comes to finding photographers or having them find me, a lot of it's been through email. I don't know how often the ones I receive emails from are relevant to our work. I do go through Workbook. I found a photographer this year through Workbook, and so that was great. But it's kind of, yeah, just email and word of mouth.
You think it's an enormous challenge, because a Zoom portfolio show, you might as well look at a website. Like you know, you're not getting the effect of this beautiful portfolio and, you know, conversation and stories and, you know, and I was feeling, even pre-COVID, I was feeling very much like a portfolio was incredibly limited anyway, because I felt like, while it was beautiful and people always commented on, oh my gosh, printed piece, it's so nice, it never really told the full story of what our photographers' capabilities were, because they, you know, I think it was Rémi who was talking about, like, you know, I need to know that you're capable of doing this shoot for me, not just taking a really amazing photograph. So I felt like it was very limiting. So during COVID, we've really been spending a lot of time figuring out, what does that portfolio show look like? What does our portfolio look like to be able to share those capabilities beyond just our images? And we're coming up with some really cool solutions that I think will be, I'll be able to reach many more people with, because I'll be able to do it through email and share what we've created, as opposed to, going to an agency and hosting a portfolio show for 10 people who just want the cupcakes. I think those kind of trips for me are going to be more about the relationship building than they will be about sharing the work in the same way, is my prediction for, what's going to happen on the rep side.
I'm seeing.
Do I want to travel? I really, really want to travel.
I'm seeing Sara nod to everything that you just said, Heather. Sara, did you want to add something there?
I think Heather has something there, because really when we did the portfolio shows, of course, we loved the work and we observed the work, but there is no need for me to be shown a printed piece at this point. So because I am following already all these artists, and the agents are doing an amazing job at sending me the email blasts that are more curated, and that are becoming truly almost brand sales for me, are becoming interesting. When reps are now sending me, we did this project together for this community and all of our artists pitched in, and this is what happened, and this is our beautiful imagery that came out of it, whether it's video, illustration, or combination of all, it really grabbed my attention. I think the best part of meeting the reps and sometimes their artists physically was that we got a palpable sense of their personality. It was a human touch based moment, right? Not so much about going through a bunch of iPads, which I can do all day long on my own. I liked that portion of getting to know someone and hearing them talk about completely different things from work. So that's the nice part that I think is still relevant.
So that really dovetails into another question. I actually have.
Heidi, I'm going to interrupt you for a second, because Kat had something she wanted to
Oh,
add.
I'm so sorry.
Just piggybacking on what everyone else has said, it's still so much about the relationships that you have, doing your homework to make sure that you're sending relevant material. And then the other thing is, because you cannot be physically where someone is, you can't send something to their home, that's where they're working. It is email, but some things haven't changed. For example, when you're sending an email, make sure it is relevant. And then simple things like use the subject line wisely. What's contained in your email? Don't attach a 200 meg file, because it's not going to make it through the firewall. And it may not be relevant to me. So, tell me what you want in the subject line: COVID-friendly video production. And then some of the most effective promotions I've seen literally were behind the scenes on how they made it happen. And that, especially early on during all of this, when people didn't have it all figured out. But maybe, again, because necessity is the mother of invention, you can show how you have solved a problem. And that could be part of what you're showing people.
Well, I have to say, Kat, I love that, because you just answered the next two questions I had. So that was very, very efficient. I have to be honest, because it was, are you getting any mailers? But here's my next, have you seen, in terms of the, you sort of touched on it just now, but have you seen unique ways, something different that just like completely grabbed your eye? I know you just said someone sent you something about this is how we do it in COVID. Obviously that was a good thing early on, but like now, are you getting it? Can you give me an example of something that's like really got your attention, and why?
And some other people were doing contests. For example, there was one photographer who had sent something about, vote on which of these you like best and which of these images you like best, and then we'll send you that photo or whatever. And so that's good for them, because they can get an engagement going, and it's something fun. It breaks up the routine. And then also, guess what? He's got my home address, and I'm giving it to him voluntarily.
Right.
The extension of that is I requested that photographer to send me those as Zoom backgrounds, send them to me as JPEGs. And guess what? I'm going to add them to my backgrounds. And I told him to put a watermark on there. So now I've given everyone this idea, but
Well,
again,
it's taken.
necessity is the mother of invention of how you can use promotions in a way, very subtle, gorgeous images. I don't mind putting them up as a background.
Well, I think you touched on two things, fun and stuff that you need, right? So, everybody right now, I know when I get an email that's fun, yeah, there's a lot of downer stuff going on in our universe right now. So fun matters, right? For sure. So I wanted to move on to the next one is, do you think portfolio shows are gone for good? That we're going to be, I think it's the last thing that's going to come back, but there's definitely portfolio events out there and so on, where you can see multiple people. Those are still happening virtually, but do you think that the shows and presentations are a thing of the past completely? I'm going to go to Allison.
I don't think they're gone completely. I do think it's sort of saying earlier that I find that's a great way just to meet photographers and to just learn what else is out there. I would say, especially out of everyone here, the newest in the industry. So I'm still building my network. I don't always know who to go to when I have a project that needs to be done. So the more of these events there are, the more resources I have, pretty much. It's hard to really replicate meeting in person and like having that conversation. It can happen through Zoom. And I think the coffee again is a great idea to just have like little tidbits of, oh, here's what's new. Emails work, but they're not the same. Like, especially if I have 20 emails when I start the day and a couple of them are mailers, it's hard to focus on them when I'm focusing on work. So to cut out time, I'm not sure how they would happen yet, but I don't want to give up on them.
Yeah.
Allison, can I chime in with something?
Mm-hmm.
I think you've touched on something really important, because we've talked about obviously the importance of relationships, and having been in the industry for 20 something years, my relationships are strong and I know a lot of people and I'm so proud of what I've built there. But I have to remember, as do everybody who's out there listening, there's a lot of people who are coming that I haven't met and are new to the industry. So you've brought up such a great point that we have to remember that we have to stay in touch with that next generation and be connected to them in a way that we're building those new relationships as well. So it means being open to, getting on a plane, trying a portfolio show, getting on a Zoom coffee, whatever it is that's relevant at the time for us, when the vaccine comes or not. There's going to be new people that we need to make new relationships with. So thank you for that reminder.
Well, and it sort of brings me into the next area, which is, finding new people. Are you all finding that you're using people that you already have relationships with, or what would someone who, maybe a new talent that you may not know about, how are they going to get to sort of be seen by you? And I want to go to Milan, because he's, in there, and I want to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair question. I think that we're basically a startup, and creativity is at the heart of our brand. I mean, listen, we're convincing a whole world of people that alcohol doesn't necessarily have to be the star player of your cocktail, which is a big undertaking, and creativity is going to be a big part of that. But having said that, I think that running a business like ours has me focused very much on existing relationships. I think that the task of finding new talent is a daunting one. And I think that, it'll be the bigger organizations that have, much like the folks on this call who are practitioners of that skill, to mill and to find the new talent. Whereas I think companies like ours are just, you're just working hard to get the project done at hand, and therefore you're going to rely on relationships close in.
Well, I want to go to Sara with that, because I feel like I missed a little hand signal from you earlier that you wanted to comment in. So I wonder if you wouldn't mind speaking to that point as well.
No, not at all. I mean, at least for me, you know, I saw in the chat some of the questions, and never give up. I look on Behance, I look all over, I scour the web all day long. Like Kat said, definitely use the one chance you have to email someone who looks at images all day long to make the best possible, fastest impression. So if I see something really well done and the image is right there in front of me as I open the email, I don't have to touch anything. It just I happen to see it. I know this sounds super lazy, but I really do get hundreds. And you know, great imagery will always grab my attention. And what I do is that I flag it. And when I have time later on in the week, I go and check out the rest of the work and pin everything that I like. And so if you don't have representation and you feel like you want to be on your own, definitely don't give up on that ability to do that. I do use, of course, Workbook as well. And other sites to keep on looking. I sometimes even call my super young art directors and ask them to send me a bunch of links of what they like every once in a while, just to get a sense of what are they looking at, you know? Certainly having an agent is always helpful on so many levels, because they do have so many contexts that can get in there, maybe more strong arm, you're a little bit more, but it really is about talent at the end of the day. So if I see someone who's incredible, I don't really care if they're represented or not.
It's always the work, right? And Kat, did you want to add anything to that too?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of different resources now, and especially with all the expanding social media resources, you know, making sure that you're covering your bases. And again, it's not any different than it was before. You just have more places where you can be, whether it's Instagram or TikTok or wherever you're creating content. Don't just limit it to one. Make sure that you have it in a variety of different resources. And the reason I like Workbook, and I'm going to put in a plug because it is honest, is that you have a great directory, right? So it really comes down to how quickly can I find someone? So because I'll bet, Sara, the hours that you spend is just like, some of it's just happenstance. You just, you know, it's random, which is really fun, but that can add time to your search. So if I can just find someone, and whatever you do, if you're going to list something in a service like that, don't really put in something unless you really are adept at it, because there's nothing worse than typing in a bunch of keywords and it says fashion, and then you don't do fashion, but you put that in because you want people to, you know, have a hit on you, and it's like totally irrelevant. So really stick to what you do.
Yeah, that's a good one. Consensual language, right? Fashion means fashion, right? Lifestyle means lifestyle. And, you know, having that language, I think, is important. I talk about that all the time. But I do feel like this has been an amazing conversation. And I want to start to wrap us up because we're right at the 12 o'clock hour. I always like to end these webinars with our silver linings. I've been asking Heather her silver lining for 9 months now. And so I'd love to ask everybody, and you know, just a thought of what your silver lining has been for 2020, something that you're grateful for, something that you learned. It could be professional, it could be private. I mean, not private, but you know what I'm saying. So, you know, I'd love to hear that. And hey, Ross, no, I'm Steve. I'd love for you to start us off. I'm never going to now call you Steve because I'm such a moron over here. Sorry about that.
Silver lining for 2020, I guess, would be resiliency and adaptability, seeing how really, you know, if anyone would have told any of us that this is what we're about to be faced with for the next X number of months or beyond, I think we all would have just curled up in a ball and said, you know, I give up. I don't know how I'll handle that. And we've all figured out ways in our own personal lives and in our work lives to keep things going. And that's, at least personally for me, the silver lining has been, first of all, very happy that I like the people I live with, so that I happen to be stuck in a house with them, and I like my wife and my daughter. So it's turned out that that's a nice thing. And
Go figure.
Go figure. Yeah. I mean, I always had a hunch I liked them, but this really convinced me. So yeah, just being adaptable to the times. It kind of shows that if we could survive this, feel pretty good about whatever the future throws at us.
That's very smart. I'd love to go to Rémi if you wouldn't mind chiming in on that.
No, not at all. So actually 2020 was one of my best years. I had so many things happen in it that I have been waiting for years. However, I think related to this subject, the silver lining is finding peace at being on your own. Because we're so used to, you're going to the company, you're meeting with people face to face, you're speaking to your supervisor, and it's not as easy now because just being remote limits the time you can speak to each person. You're not with a group in a room. So just finding, solace in being on my own and having to think on my own without being always able to speak to other people was, I think, very, insightful. And it was a struggle in the beginning because I'm not used to it. As creatives, you want to brainstorm and everything. But I think it actually really something that has changed in me. And I think it will just go with me for the rest of my life, will be with me for the rest of my life, being able to function on my own.
Wow, that's definitely a positive and a silver lining. I'd love to go to Kat if we can for the next answer.
And again, it's additive to what everyone else is saying, but what we thought was impossible is possible. Who would have ever thought you could actually do a production without physically being there? Who would have thought that every role at an agency or production could be done from home, right? No one would have thought those things. Who would have thought that we're at a place where the tools are allowing us to do that now? Whereas again, 5 years ago, they wouldn't have. So the things if you need to, you can make it happen.
I'd love to go to Milan right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the silver lining is, the need for great marketing and content hasn't slowed during this whole experience. I think, and our industry didn't wither. People stepped up. The technology enabled us. And considering the circumstances, I think we've thrived. I think that there's obviously still hardships happening across the industry, but by and large, things are still getting made. We're still seeing great stuff on online and on TV and in print, and it gives a lot of reason to think 2021 is going to be an even better year.
And Allison, can you chime in for me?
On a more personal note, I moved back home when my lease ended, so getting to spend this much time with my family is great. I haven't seen my parents this many days in a row since I was in high school, so it's good and bad, but it is mostly good.
That's family is a wonderful silver lining. And Sara, can I move on to you?
Sure. I think for me, it's been seeing people helping each other so much more and so much more often, finding that everyone was calmer and kinder, knowing that what we do is not saving lives necessarily every day, and that's good too. And then, the fun parts like dancing doctors, TikTok videos all over the place, and tons of animals being adopted, and everybody got a puppy. So the little things are my silver lining.
I like that. And last but not least, Heather.
I've said the same thing many times on this webinar and in conversations, that I think as an industry, as a culture, personally, professionally, we were all operating at speeds that were not sustainable. So I really appreciated the time, although I feel like I was busier than ever, to just sit with my thoughts, like Rémi said, develop a different conscience, like Sara said, the freedom of new tools. Everything that everyone said here came out of this time. And I don't want to go back to that pace before. I want to see who our next best person is, and it's starting to evolve, and I like what I'm starting to see. It needs to be over, though. There's so many people hurting and so much heartache, and it's a terrible time. And while we have been fortunate to be moving this industry forward, it needs to end.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think my silver lining is this to a huge degree. Being able to have these kinds of conversations is enormous to me. And I also, you know, Zoom is a huge silver lining for me. Heather's in San Francisco. Some of you guys are on the East Coast. None of us are anywhere near each other, but we're all together. And like Steve was saying, trying to coordinate people to be together. Like, I can have everybody in my family. Zoom is a big silver lining for me, and I'm never giving it up. I love looking at people while we're talking. I think it's fantastic, not just in this iteration, but in so many. So that Zoom is a big silver lining for me. But I also have to say that allowing me to give perspective to my own personal life and professional life, prioritizing what I'm trying to accomplish, like COVID did that. It paused and made me focus about what really matters, both in both sides of my world. And I can't say I'm not grateful for that. I think I really, really am. So, but I'm incredibly grateful for all of you guys. Like right now, today, you are all giving me your time, or giving us your time. Is really generous, and the insights that you all have shared with us are really amazing, and things you made me think. I'm always engaged when we have these conversations. I know Heather and I are always thinking, hey, what are we going to talk about? You guys make that part so easy, because you're so smart, you're so insightful, and you're so generous with your spirit and your time. So I just want to say I cannot thank you all enough. It is sort of time for us to sign off. I know we've gone over time, but just thank you, thank you, thank you. Heather, did you want to say anything? I'm muted, or you're muted.
Just have a safe holiday. Wash your hands.
Wash your hands, and
here's good to you.
And here's to 2021. I think we're all looking forward to seeing what that looks like. So thank you all so much. I'm going to do the goodbye part, and thank you, thank you, thank you.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.